Okay, so today we have our usage and grammar section, including punctuation and sentence formatting. And then we have our reading comprehension long passage. And we also have our vocabulary and etymology section. So let's get started. The Fulton Fish Market. Walking in Manhattan just south of the Brooklyn Bridge, comma, feeling as if I've been transported back in time, period. Okay, that's not a complete sentence. So both of those are what we call ing phrases. They're dependent clauses. So you don't have a sentence there. So you have to have a sentence in order for you to put a period there, right? So what you want to do when you look at 31 is see what you can replace it with to actually make it a sentence. You need a subject and a verb. So if you look, a feeling that is like, no, that's not it. I feel, subject, verb. I feel as if. So let's put that in there. Walking Manhattan just south of the Brooklyn Bridge, comma, I feel as if I've been transported back in time. Yeah, that's the only correct answer. The rest of them will not give you a complete sentence, which you need. So C is the correct answer. The streets at the South Street Seaport are paved with cobblestones. Bobbing up and down in the East River are several well-preserved 19th century multi-masted schooners. So should you put a comma after several? What if I said 100 well-preserved or 200 well-preserved? Several is an amount, right? So it's a number, it's more than one, right? So would you put a comma after 100 well-preserved? No, you would not. So you don't need a comma here. So what you would do here is you look for an answer that doesn't involve a comma after several. So let's go over here. This has a comma, that has a comma. It's the only one that doesn't have a comma. Several well-preserved 19th century multi-masted schooners. So the right answer here is J. Okay? I mean, oh, hi, Billy. Welcome. So the answer to 32 is J. Now we're moving on to 33. Can you mute whoever's, somebody needs to mute. Billy, you need to mute. Because I can hear you. Yeah, good. Okay, here we go. So we're on the next page. The most potent link to the seaport's past, however, is the fishy smell coming from the East River. Okay, because Fulton Fish Market is right on the East River, which is not really a river. It's the water between Brooklyn and Manhattan. It's actually part of the ocean, but they call it the East River. From 1822 to 2005, the Fulton Fish Market served as a vital link between the fishing industry and the New York City fish trade and was considered the most important wholesale fish market on the East Coast. Okay, so you know what that sentence is. You know the sentence before. So look at 33. Which of the following true statements, if added here, would introduce the main topic of the essay and provide the best transition to the next paragraph? So basically, the main topic is the Fulton Fish Market. Okay, you just talked about the smell of the fish coming from the river. So let's look at these choices. What would go right here? The other major river in New York is the Hudson. Totally irrelevant. It is a pungent reminder, pungent meaning strong smelling, reminder of the fish market that operated here on Fulton Street for nearly 2 centuries. See, the fish market operated 2 centuries, and then into the next sentence, next paragraph, you actually say the dates and you say the Fulton Fish Market. So this is a great transition. It talks about the smell, makes a reference back to the smell of fish, and then it introduces the idea of a fish market that was around for a long, long time. Personally, I don't mind the fishy smell, irrelevant. The East River separates the island of Manhattan from Brooklyn, irrelevant. So the only right answer here as a transition sentence is B. Okay. So we'll move on now to 34. The market would open as early as 3 a.m. on weekday mornings, comma. This is when fishing boat crews would bring their fresh catch into the East River. So the market would open as early as 3 a.m. on weekday mornings. If you're going to start this is when, this would be a period, and you would start a new sentence, okay? But here what you have is two sentences that are glued together with a comma, which is essentially a run-on sentence. So you need something to replace this that's not going to be a run-on sentence. So let's take a look. The market would open as early as 3 a.m. on weekday mornings, comma. On such mornings, fishing boat crews would bring their fresh catch. Okay. That again is going to be a run-on sentence. Okay, because you're making a new sentence after the comma. Aha, how about this one? Which is when? The market would open as early as 3 a.m. on weekday mornings, which is when fishing boat crews would bring their fresh catch in. This works because, again, it's a dependent clause and it's not a second sentence, so you don't have a run-on sentence. So this actually works, which is when. To delete the underlined portion, it would sound pretty crazy. Market would open as early as 3 a.m. on weekday mornings. Fishing boat crews would bring their, it would just be essentially two separate sentences. Okay. So again, it would not work. So the only one that is a dependent clause that would make this correct, make the comma correct, and keep it as a single sentence would be which is when. So 34 is H. Okay. Bring their fresh catch in to the East River. Do you bring something into something? No. Given that all choices are accurate, which one is the most relevant at this point in the paragraph? So this is when the fishing boat crews would bring their fresh catch in to sell to wholesale distributors. The distributors, in turn, would sell the fish to the buyers. So this makes perfect sense, right? Sell to distributors. The distributors then would sell to the buyers. So this is a good choice right here. Okay. This is incorrect because you don't bring something into something, you bring it from something. Okay. After spending time at sea, bring their fresh catch in. Well, that's just a waste of words. Obviously, they were out fishing. For payday, again, totally out of context. We're talking about bringing the fish in and what happens to the fish. And this doesn't tell you that. So they bring them in to sell to the wholesale distributors. And then the distributors, in turn, sell the fish to buyers. Okay. So the right answer to 35 is B. Okay. Then 36 is right here. The distributors, in turn, would sell the fish to buyers whom purchased seafood for local restaurants and stores. Okay. This is an object of a verb. Whom. You want to use who, because who purchased? Whom doesn't purchase. Okay. Whom becomes the object of the verb. Who functions as a subject. So you got to understand the difference between who and whom. Okay. So you'd say, who called whom? Who called whom? The who being the subject that's calling and the who being the object of the verb. So this is incorrect. So the right answer, if we go to 36, sell fish to the buyers who purchase seafood for local restaurants and stores. Okay, that's all you need to do is change the whom to who, and you've got it correct. So 36 is J, and we move on. As I approached, I could hear a clamor of voices as hundreds of fishmongers, a fishmonger is somebody who sells fish, and buyers haggled over prices. Rows upon rows of carts and wooden bins packed with ice and seafood was cramped. Okay, that's singular. This is plural. Okay, rows were packed, were crammed. So 37 can't be was because the subject is plural. So the right answer has to be were. Past tense, plural. Simple past tense, okay? Rows upon rows of carts and wooden bins packed with ice and seafood were crammed into the building, period. So the right answer to 37 is C. I remember the first time I visited the market. That's a complete sentence. Anyone new to the market would be overwhelmed by the variety of seafood alone, with live blue crabs, half-ton swordfish, 20-pound tuna fillets, fresh octopus. Okay. So we're looking right here. Anyone new to the market would be overwhelmed by the variety of seafood alone. And then we have a choice of punctuation. Okay. Or we can put no punctuation. Okay. So let's look at our choices. Alone, comma, there were live blue crabs. Okay, that's a new sentence. So this should be a period and this should be a capital. So this is wrong. Alone, okay. You put a colon here, right there, and you got to list stuff. So alone, colon, live blue crabs, half-ton swordfish, 20-pound tuna fillets, fresh octopus. So this actually works. Okay. This is a semicolon. It separates two complete sentences. Okay. So if you put a semicolon here, what comes after the semicolon is not a sentence. So this is wrong. Semicolons are also used to separate objects in a list. If each object has an internal comma or one of them has an internal comma, use a semicolon to separate objects in a list. So the colon works. Okay. The question is this right? I visited a market. Anyone new to the market would be overwhelmed by the variety of seafood alone with live blue crabs. Okay. People will read this that you're alone with the crabs. You see what I mean? It runs together, so it's hard to get the meaning here. But if you put the colon there, you're indicating that you're going to be listing the variety of seafood alone, colon, crabs, swordfish, tuna fillets, octopus. So the right answer here is H. You put the colon, you alerts the reader that you're actually listing what the fish are. And then you list them. Now, the next one is kind of tricky. Which choice best maintains the descriptive pattern established in the list of seafood? You want to leave it as fresh octopus, change it to some other slightly more exotic species, something that I think was octopus, etc. Okay, here's the deal. These are all very specific. Blue crabs, half-ton swordfish, 20-pound tuna fillets, very specific. So you don't want to use something like some other or something that I think, because these are very kind of non-specific. The question is, should you leave it as fresh octopus or should you change it to etc.? And in keeping with the feeling of this naming of the actual species with a description, live crabs, half-ton swordfish, tuna fillets, fresh octopus. So this is in keeping with this idea of a little modifier plus the species, okay? So no change is a good answer. And actually, it's the correct answer because etc. is really not in keeping with these specific descriptions, right? Etc. is kind of vague, right? But the only thing I would caution you on is that the plural of octopus is octopi with an I. Or you can say octopuses, but most people say octopi. So crabs is plural, swordfish can be plural, fillets are plural. So this probably should be fresh octopi, but they said fresh octopus, just treating it generically as a type of meat. So the right answer here to 39 is no change. Most consistent with how the rest of the list is being described. Okay? 40, for the sake of logic and cohesion, sentence 3 should be placed. So sentence 3, I remember the first time I visited the market. Okay, that's always an opening sentence. It should be opening the paragraph. Because then he goes on to approach, he goes on to tell you what happened. He approached, he went and saw the rows, And then he looked at all of the variety, but the whole process, okay, is basically him when he first visited the market. So this sentence needs to be before one. Okay, so the right answer to 40 is G. This is an introductory sentence to the paragraph. I remember the first time I visited the market. As I approached, I could hear this. There were rows of wooden bins with ice. There were all types of fish. It's all about his experience the first time he went to the market. So that's what you want to put first in the sentence. Good. Dodging forklifts, I made my way past bins of ice lined with fish laid side by side, head to tail, head to tail. Okay, so you can see the fish lying in the bin, right? And we're moving on to the next. Today, because of my passing by the building that once was a Fulton Fish Market, today, comma, as I pass by the building, okay, this is present tense. As I pass by the building that once was the Fulton Fish Market, comma, I listen to the excited voices of tourists who have come to visit the nearby Seaport Museum and shop at the seaport. I listen, I pass. Okay, the tense has to agree. Being that I pass is not present tense, while in passing is not present tense. This is not present tense. The only thing that is as I pass. So if you read this, today, as I pass by the building that once was the Fulton Fish Market, I listen to the excited voices. Okay, so D is the only correct answer because of the verb tense. Okay, good. The area is still busy, comma, so the market itself moved in 2005 to the Bronx, where it now operates as the new Fulton Fish Market Cooperative. No, you don't use the word so here as a connector, okay? Because it doesn't make any sense. Something like, let me think, the water bottle was empty, so I was thirsty. The second part needs to follow logically from the first. It doesn't. The area is still busy, so the market moved. This doesn't make any sense. Okay, the area is still busy, not because the market moved, that would make it less busy. So is wrong, but is the right answer. The area is still busy, but the market itself moved in 2005 to the Bronx, where it now operates as the new Fulton Fish Market Cooperative, period. So you have to understand the difference between but as a rejoinder and so. It's busy, but it's not busy because of the market. Okay, so that's why this logically makes sense and this doesn't. So the right answer to 42 is H. Okay, 43. It's easy to imagine, comma, likewise, the market still echoing around me here in Fulton Street. It's easy to imagine, though. Okay, let me explain that. The market's gone. It went to the Bronx. But because of his memory of the market, it's easy for him to imagine. Okay? Even though the market has gone elsewhere. Okay? The market has moved. It's easy to imagine, though, even though it's moved, the market's still echoing around me here on Fulton Street. So this is the only one that makes sense. It's gone, though I remember it. Okay? In other words, makes no sense. As a matter of fact, makes no sense. And likewise makes no sense. The only one that makes sense is though. It's logical. Even though it's gone, I can imagine it because I was there once. All I have to do is close my eyes and take a deep breath. Okay, so now we do these questions. The writer is considering adding the following true sentence to the essay. In 1924, for example, the market sold 384 million pounds of fish 25% of all the seafood sold in the United States. That's huge out of one market. If the writer were to add the sentence, it would most logically be placed where? Well, I want to take you back to paragraph 2. Okay, B. Let's see how it reads. From 1822 to 2005, the Fulton Fish Market served as a vital link between the fishing industry and the New York City fish trade. It was considered the most important wholesale fish market on the East Coast. Right there, you would say it sold 386 pounds, thousand or million pounds of. In 1924, for example, the market sold 384 million pounds of fish, 25%. So right after you've said how important the market is, okay, the most important market, you follow it up with a sentence that shows you how busy the market was, how much fish they sold, how important it was. So that's where that sentence goes, right there at B in paragraph 2. So the answer to 44 is point B in paragraph 2. G is the answer. Suppose the writer's primary purpose had been to give an overview of a historic site, the Fulton Fish Market, by blending facts, which he gave you, how long it's been in business, how much it's how much fish it sold at one time, where it moved to, with personal experiences. Yeah, he talked about when he went there. Would this essay accomplish that purpose? Yes, it would, because he gives you facts and he also gives you personal experience. So we need to choose yes, but we don't know which one. So let's read them both. Yes, because it outlines the history of the original Fulton Fish Market and describes the central role the narrator played in that history. He didn't play a central role, he just remembered it. Yes, because it provides information about the original Fulton Fish Market through the narrator's memories of the market. There you go. So B is the right answer. He didn't play a central role, he just visited there. Okay, so 45 is B. Okay, guys, surf's up. We're done. And now we're going to move on to our long passage, which is an interesting passage. It's full of metaphor. And I'll go over that metaphor. This passage is adapted from the article Out of Rembrandt's Shadow by Matthew Gurwitch. Telescopes trained on the night sky. Astronomers observe the phenomenon of the binary star, which appears to the naked eye to be a single star, but consists in fact of two orbiting a common center of gravity. So two stars basically dancing in a circle with each other. Sometimes one star in the pair can so outshine the other that its companion may be detected only by the way its movement periodically alters the brightness of the greater star. So when the lesser star gets in the way of our telescope, it looks like there's dimming going on because it's like an eclipse. But basically the idea is two stars circling each other together, very close. The binary stars we recognize in the firmament of art. So now he's using a metaphor. He talked about astronomy and how they have these binary star systems. Now he's saying in the field of art, meaning painting, we also have binary stars. And he's referring to artists who lived at the same time and painted in the same style and worked maybe near each other or with each other. Okay? The binary stars that we see in the firmament of art tend to be of equal brilliance. So now he's talking about two artists that are equally famous, that were from the same period, same style, maybe same location. Raphael and Michelangelo, both of them are famous and very well known. Van Gogh and Gauguin, again, both famous and very well known. Picasso and Matisse, both famous and very well known. But the special case of an invisible companion, a star that's not as bright, is not unknown. Consider Jan Lievens. He's the dull star that nobody knows about. Born in Leiden in Western Holland on October 24th, 1607, just 15 months after the birth of Rembrandt van Rijn, another Leiden native. So here we have a star system in the world of art, a binary system, where one, Rembrandt, is super famous. He's the shining bright star. And Lievens is the smaller star that's less bright, that nobody notices. So there's an imbalance in the dual binary star system, at least when it comes to these two artists. The other three examples, the artists are equally bright. They're all famous. But in this case, Rembrandt is super famous and Levens is not. And that's what he's saying. While the two were alive, admirers spoke of them in the same breath. So they were obviously painted very similar style. And the comparisons were not always in Rembrandt's favor, meaning that a lot of people thought that Levens was a better painter. After their deaths, we're talking hundreds of years now, Levens dropped out of sight for centuries. Nobody talked about him. So after they died, Rembrandt became more and more famous, and Levens became less and less well known. Though the artists took quite different paths, their biographies show many parallels. Both served apprenticeships in Amsterdam with the same master, so they had the same teacher. Returned to that city later in life and died there in their 60s. So they both left and came back and died in their 60s. They knew each other, may have shared a studio in Leiden where they painted together early on, definitely shared models, and indeed modeled for each other. So they sat for each other to paint each other. They painted on panels, wood panels, cut from the same oak tree. So they must have known each other, which suggests that they made joint purchases of art supplies from the same vendor. So these guys were very close. They later showed the same unusual predilection, that means a bias towards something, for drawing on paper imported from the Far East. Must have been rice paper. So they had all these different things in common, yet Rembrandt became more and more famous over the centuries, and Levens became less and less well known. The work the two produced in their early 20s in Leiden was not always easy to tell apart. And as time went on, many a superior Levens painting was misattributed to Rembrandt. So they would look at a Levens painting and say, oh, it's a Rembrandt. That's how similar they were. And they were both excellent painters. Quality aside, there are many reasons why one artist's star shines while another artist's fades. It mattered that Rembrandt spent virtually his entire career in one place, cultivating a single, highly personal style. So he carved out an identity for himself in the art world. Whereas Levens moved around, absorbing many different influences. Equally important, Rembrandt lent himself to the role of the lonely genius, a figure dear to the Romantics, whose preference would shape the tastes of generations to come. So he kind of set himself up as a martyr for art. He suffered for his art. That made him a very romantic, very heroic figure. So for those two reasons, his ability to carve out his specific style or identity, and the fact that he was a loner, who supposedly suffered for his art, this is what the author thinks made him so famous. Whereas Levens, I guess people just forgot about him, even though he painted wonderful paintings. While Levens' name will be new to many, his work may not be. The sumptuous, meaning lavish, luxurious, biblical, spectacular, which is a painting, is called The Feast of Esther. That's a painting. Was last sold in 1952 as an early Rembrandt. So Levens painted The Feast of Esther, but the art critics thought it was painted by Rembrandt and was long identified as such in 20th century textbooks. So that's how good Levens was. He painted something that everyone thought was by Rembrandt. It is one of more than 130 works featured in the current tour of the International Retrospective, quote, Jan Levens, a Dutch master rediscovered. So they're trying basically to highlight his work and show people that he was an important artist because he'd been forgotten. The artworks in so many genres are hardly the works of an also-ran. Okay, we've always seen Levens through the bright light of Rembrandt as a pale reflection, says Arthur Wheelock Jr., curator of the Northern Baroque paintings at the National Gallery. That's London. This show lets you embrace Levens from beginning to end to understand that this man has his own trajectory and that he wasn't always in the gravity pull of Rembrandt. Again, astronomy. right? Trajectory is the path of a celestial object. And then gravity occurs, right, in the universe. So he's making references to astronomy. And that's this guy, Wheelock, just like the author did. He made references to astronomy. Okay. Wheelock has been particularly struck by the muscularity and boldness of Leavens, which is in marked contrast to most Dutch painting of the time. The approach is much rougher, much more aggressive, he says. Leavens was not a shy guy with paint. He manipulates it, he scratches it, he gives it a really physical presence. So his paintings are highly textured. Probably if you ran your finger over them, you would feel the bumps and the valleys. Okay, so he's very passionate in the way he paints. And a lot of the Dutch painters their paintings are very smooth. Leavens painted the Feast of Esther around 1625, about the time Rembrandt returned to Leiden. It is approximately 4.5 by 5.5 feet. It's a huge painting with figures shown 3/4 length, close to the picture plane, meaning they're not far back. At that time, Rembrandt favored smaller formats. So this was a big painting, the Feast of Esther. At the luminous center of the composition, that means well lit, a pale Queen Esther points an accusing finger at Haman, the royal counselor. Her husband, the Persian king Ahasuerus, shares her light, his craggy face set off by a snowy turban and a mantle of gold brocade. That's the shirt that he's wearing. Seen from behind in shadowy profile, Haman is silhouetted against shimmering white drapery, his right hand flying up in dismay. So basically, Esther is revealing Haman's plot to kill all the Jews because he wanted to have all the Jews in Persia killed. And since he was very powerful, but the king didn't even know it. And the king was married to Esther. So and Esther was a Jew. So as a Jewish woman, she felt she had to defend the Jews. So she told her husband, hey, he's going to be killing all the Jews. And her husband was not happy. So Haman wound up getting hanged. He was executed. But the stories of the Feast of Esther comes from the Old Testament in the Bible. So you can read the story in the Old Testament, and that's what the painting is all about. Okay? Silks, satins, and brocades, elegant plumes and gemstones. Details like these give Leavens ample scope to show off his flashy handling of this medium. So he can paint all kinds of material. He can paint feathers. He can paint gemstones like diamonds and rubies. And he's very good at it. He's flashy at handling it. Not for him is the fastidious, enamel smooth surfaces of the Leiden Finschilders, fine painters. In other words, he's not into that delicate, smooth style. He's into like this bold style, in whose meticulously rendered oils every brushstroke disappeared. Leavens reveled in the thickness of the paint and the way it could be shaped and scratched and swirled with a brush, even with the sharp end of a handle. This tactile quality is one of Rembrandt's hallmarks as well. There are now those who think he picked it up from Leavens. So not only is Leavens a great painter who was unrecognized, but maybe equal to Rembrandt, or at least close, but he also apparently influenced Rembrandt's painting too. So that influence on Rembrandt is evident by these the hallmarks of the way that the paint is used. Okay, so there you go for Leavens. We don't want to ever say that Leavens is not an important painter, because he is. Okay, so let's go ahead and answer the questions. Now, we went over this in some detail, so I'm thinking that a lot of these questions we're going to be able to answer just by our memory, but if we have to go back to the text, we will. The main purpose of the passage is to argue that Leavens' artwork are superior to Rembrandt. No, he never said that. Bring Leavens out of obscurity, meaning being unknown, by discussing him as both a peer of Rembrandt, in other words, working together with him, and an artist in his own right. Yes, B is the right answer. C, criticize the art world's belated recognition of Rembrandt. No, he's not criticizing anyone. Illustrate the profound differences between Leavens' training and Rembrandt's. The opposite is true. He said their training was very similar. So the only right answer is B. 22. In the passage, both the author and Wheelock, who's the critic, the art expert, describe the effect that Rembrandt's popularity had on Leavens by analyzing biographical similarities, comparing Leavens' early work to his later work, personifying Leavens' painting style, using astronomy metaphors. Yeah, J. So the author uses the metaphor of the binary stars with a bright and a dim one. And Arthur Wheelock, who's the curator, the art critic, he talks about the gravitational pull of Rembrandt on Leavens. Okay? So they both use astronomy metaphors, and that's the right answer, using astronomy metaphors, J. All right, 23. In the context of the passage, the main purpose of the first paragraph is to introduce, remember now, it's all about binary star systems, a scientific phenomenon that mirrors the relationship between Rembrandt and Leavens. That's a good answer. An exceptional painting by Leavens. No, they didn't get into that in the first paragraph. The innovative culture in which Rembrandt and Leavens lived, they didn't discuss that in the first paragraph. A historical event that inspired them, they didn't discuss that. So the only right answer here is this scientific relationship that mirrors the relationship of the bipolar star system, the binary star system, Leavens and Rembrandt. So the right answer to 23 is A. 24, the passage most nearly suggests that in contrast to Rembrandt and Leavens, other artists who are considered members of artistic pairs have tended to be of equal brightness, right? Picasso and Matisse, Raphael and Michelangelo, right? Van Gogh and Gauguin. They're all six of them are very famous. So those binary star systems, both stars are equally bright. So whereas Rembrandt and Leavens is the dark star and Rembrandt's the bright star. Build their reputations by staying in one city, underappreciated, achieve equal recognition in the art world, equal brightness. So the other pairs had equal brightness. So the right answer is H. Okay, 25. In the context of the passage, the description of the subjects featured in the painting, The Feast of Esther, mainly served to, okay, so if we go to line 72 to 79, it's describing the painting. Okay, the luminous center, super bright, where the light concentrates of the composition, a pale queen pointing an accusing finger. Her husband shares the light that she has in the center. His craggy face, meaning textured face, set off by a snowy turban and a mantle of golden brocade. So there's a lot going on there describing technique. And then seen from behind, a shadowy profile, silhouetted against a shimmering white drapery. So he's trying to give you an idea of the energy of Leavens' painting, okay? So if we look at this, provide an analogy for the tense relationship between Rembrandt and Leavens, that's totally off point. Demonstrate how Leavens' art reflected Dutch political dynamics, no mention of that. Illustrate Leavens' bold painting style and attention to detail, there it is. Describing his technique and the effect that his canvas has. Exemplify techniques common in Dutch painting. Now, Dutch painters tend to be very subtle, and Leavens was not very subtle in his painting. So C is the right answer. 26. The passage indicates that Leavens' recognition in the art community declined most significantly at which of the following times? Well, over the centuries after they died. Because when they were both alive, people talked about Leavens. So let's see. When Leavens returned to Amsterdam, while Leavens was painting, when Rembrandt returned after Rembrandt and Leavens died, right? After they died over the centuries, Leavens his star dimmed and Rembrandt's star got brighter and brighter. So the right answer, 26, is J. The passage most strongly suggests that Leavens might have attained more recognition if he had painted in collaboration, more historical subjects, in one specific style, in smaller formats. The right answer here is C. Remember that Rembrandt spent all his career in one place cultivating a single, highly personal style. And that's why perhaps the artist thinks he became famous. So if Leavens had done the same thing, and a specific style, he might have become famous too, but he didn't. So C is the right answer. The passage indicates that Rembrandt appealed to the Romantics because he was supposed to be a suffering artist and a loner. He fit their ideal of the lonely, brilliant artist. F is a good answer. He traveled widely. No. His artwork featured scenes of courtship. His artwork shaped the tastes of later generations. All these may be true. However, the reason that he was so appealing to the Romantics was that he was a loner and he was a brilliant artist who suffered for his art. So F is the right answer. 29. The fact that the Feast of Esther was misidentified as an early Rembrandt painting is most directly used in the passage to support the author's claim that Leavens' work is considered by modern art critics to be inferior, peaked in quality during Leavens' early adulthood, may be familiar to some, even though Leavens' name is not. So here they are, they're looking at the Feast of Esther. They're familiar with his work, but they think it's Rembrandt, right? Even the art critics. So this is a good answer. Can be difficult for art exhibitors to obtain. Doesn't say anything about that. So here it is. Leavens' paintings are admired and sold for a lot of money as Rembrandt's. So people are familiar with Leavens' work, but they haven't heard his name. Okay? So C is the right answer. 30, the last sentence of the passage most clearly serves to, let's remind ourselves, the last sentence of the passage. Let's see, this tactile quality is one of Rembrandt's hallmarks as well. There are now those who think he picked it up from Leavens. So Leavens teaching Rembrandt or influencing Rembrandt. The last sentence serves to summarize the passage's arguments, suggests that Leavens may have influenced Rembrandt artistically, there it is, argued that Leavens and Rembrandt collaborated, outlined a controversy regarding the authenticity of the paintings. It's basically to suggest that Leavens, certain techniques that Rembrandt picked up from Leavens. So the right answer here is G. Okay? And so we're done now with the reading comprehension section. So we're going to stop sharing and we're going to go to our vocabulary list, which we love. Here we go. These are our words. Good words today, of course. So what do you think firmament means? Firmament. Anybody? Okay, when you're referring to the firmament, you're referring to the heavens, to the sky above you, the whole heavens, all of it around you, as far as you can see from horizon to horizon. That's the firmament. Okay, so if you say the plane disappeared into the firmament, just went up into the air and it was gone. Okay, that's what describes this, the big sky, the firmament, the heavens. Okay, what's a predilection? He has a predilection for something.
Preference?
Yeah, preference or a special liking of something. I have a predilection to cooked oysters rather than raw oysters. I have a preference for it. So predilection. It's not predilection, it's predilection. Make sure you pronounce that right. Something that is sumptuous. That's a great word, sumptuous. What do you think that means? People often use that word to describe a meal, a dinner. And it's a super fancy dinner with all kinds of delicious, really classy food, and maybe beautiful china, beautiful crystal, and tablecloth, and flowers, and just a fantastic banquet. Sumptuous basically means luxurious, expensive looking, splendid. So you can describe a meal as being sumptuous, or a room. I walked into the room with its oriental carpet and velvet chairs and masterwork paintings on the wall. It was a sumptuous room, very expensive, right? Craggy. What's something that's craggy? We actually had this word before. So a mountainside can be craggy, or a person's face can be craggy. So what do you think it means? Basically, it means rough and uneven, like a lot of hills and gullies. Like, you know, an old man's face is craggy. It's got like lots of lines in it. And the side of a rocky mountain is craggy. So that's how you use that word. You can You could say old man's face was craggy under his hat. Or you could say the mountainside appeared craggy and there were rock falls. Okay. Brocade. What's a brocade? It's a very specific type of fabric. And you need to understand what a brocade is. Does anyone know? Okay. It's a rich fabric like silk or very fine wool. And it's embroidered, meaning there are design patterns that are sewn into it, but they're sewn in such a way that they're elevated above the cloth. So they're almost like braille. You can feel them. You can see them and you can feel them. That's what a brocade is. And it's extremely difficult to sew it. Okay, so they're very, very expensive. And apparently the king in the Feast of Esther was wearing a brocade mantle or a shirt that had those kinds of designs sewn into the cloth that were elevated, they were raised up from the cloth. Okay, that's what a brocade is. Plumes, the plume has different definitions. What's the most common thing when you say he was covered in plumage? What does plumage mean? It's another word. Say it again, honey.
Feather?
Yeah, it's another word for feather. He had a plume in his hat. He had a feather in his hat. Certain birds have very bright plumage. They have lots of bright, colorful feathers. Okay, so it can also be a cloud of smoke. A bomb exploded in the eastern part of London, and there was a plume of smoke that rose from the building. So think about a cloud of smoke rising up, and it's almost shaped like a feather. So we refer to that as a plume of smoke. The other thing that you need to know is when you're talking about environmental issues, this is very, very important. So if I take a huge tank of toxic heavy metal and benzene, and I pour it into the ground, okay, and then 20 years later, it has spread downward and outward, all of that pollution, okay? That's a plume as well. And that's, you say, how far has the plume gone? How deep has the plume gone? You're basically referring to pollution that has spread downward and outward in the soil. So it's not a good thing if you have a plume of toxic chemicals in the ground. Okay. Oh, what does the word fastidious mean? Someone who is very fastidious in their work. Very attentive to detail. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed, every letter is perfectly formed. Accuracy 100%. So if you have a fastidious person working in your office, that's a good thing because they're gonna do a great job. They're gonna get everything right. They're perfectionists in what they perform. Okay, so it's being fastidious is a good thing. Okay, what does it mean when something is tactile? Tactile. All it means is it's related to touching. Tactile. He was blind, but he had a tactile impression of the sculpture. So he put his hands on the sculpture and he rubbed his fingers over it. And through his sense of touch, he had a tactile impression. Okay? So when you use the word tactile, you're referring to something related to touching, physically touching something. Okay? The sensation of touch. Okay, extent or extant. The right pronunciation is extant. You want to emphasize the first syllable, extant. When something is extant, what does it mean?
Isn't it like to exist?
Say it again, honey.
Like to exist, existence?
Yeah. It's the opposite of extinct. If something's extinct, it's gone. If something's extant, it's here, it's surviving. It's still in existence, it's surviving. It's extant. So you could say alligators are, 100 million years old, but they're extant in today's world. They exist. They survived all those years. whereas the dodo bird is extinct as opposed to extant. So you want to contrast those two words. Okay, our final word is expurgate. Now, what is it when you expurgate something? What exactly are you doing? Okay, so if I write a novel, a book, and it's full of curse words, bad words, terrible words, ugly words, words that you should not use in polite company, and I send it to the editor, he looks at it and he goes, oh my God. And he takes all the bad words out. He's expurgating the novel. He's pulling out, removing all the objectionable, unsuitable stuff. He's cutting it, he's editing it, he's altering it, he's expurgating. Okay? So think of it as editing out bad things or removing bad things. Okay, and it's frequently used when you talk about an editor going over a piece of writing. Okay, he would expurgate the bad words from the novel. Okay, now we're going to do our etymology. We're going to start with expurgate. Now it's from Latin, and ex is the prefix, and purgate is the root, essentially. Ex means out, and purgate is from the Latin purgare, which means to cleanse, to clean. So to clean out, to expurgate, to clean out. Now, can you name another word that uses this root? Purg, P-U-R-G. What other words do you know that would use that root in English? What about the word purgatory? What is purgatory? According to Catholic doctrine, purgatory is a place where you go, your soul will go there after you die to cleanse your soul of certain imperfections before you go to heaven. So purgatory is not as bad as hell. Once you go to hell, you're stuck in hell. You burn for all eternity. But if you go to purgatory, you basically got a chance to go to heaven. You just got to clean up a few things, cleanse your soul. That's why they call it purgatory. And eventually, if you succeed in that, then you'll wind up going to heaven. But the word purgatory is often used to mean being in a very unpleasant place for a long time. So listening to Jim's long and boring speech was like purgatory for me. So if you're in purgatory, symbolically, it means you're kind of in a place that's really not very nice and you really don't want to be there. But again, it's not as bad as hell. Okay. The other word is purge. When you purge yourself, you take a laxative and you get all of the poison out of your stomach. You're purging yourself, cleansing yourself out. And the other thing is, you can use the word purge in a way that is not as pleasant in terms of outcome. Like you would say something like, the Nazi Party purged itself of any person who sympathized with Jews. So often when there's a purge that's going on politically within a nation, it usually means the elimination of a group of people. It's not necessarily a pleasant thing. It could be it could be mass murder or mass exile. You're getting rid of a whole bunch of people. You're purging. So you can use it in that political sense, and it's not as positive a thing. Okay, so purgatory, purge, and then expurgate, all coming from the Latin purgare, which means to cleanse or to clean. Okay, so that makes sense. Now, in 1818, 200 years after Shakespeare, there was a man named Thomas Bowdler, B-O-W-D-L-E-R, Bowdler. And Thomas Bowdler thought that Shakespeare's plays had too many adult themes meaning related to sex or violence. And he rewrote all of Shakespeare's plays and took out the bad parts. And he called it Family Shakespeare Book for kids, for the whole family. He published his book in 1818. And Thomas Bowdler basically was made fun of because he basically ruined all of Shakespeare's plays. Because he didn't get it. He just didn't understand that by taking out all those things, he basically destroyed the art. So there's a term called Bowdlerizing, named after Thomas Bowdler. When you Bowdlerize something, you remove the things that have meaning because you're offended by them. So it's kind of a silly form of editing that really destroys the art. So to Bowdlerize something is not a good thing. Okay? And it comes in after this guy, Thomas Bowdler. Okay, our second word for tonight is firmament. And you'd say, well, why is the word firm describing the sky, which is all air? It seems like the word firm should not be a description of this light, breezy air that is the heavens, right? Firm seems like it'd be something really hard. Well, the explanation for this is that it comes from the Latin firmamentum. And firmamentum basically meant a support from below. So people thought that the sky was supported by strong arches that held the sky up. And this is why it was called the firmament, okay? And in Latin, the word firmus, F-I-R-M-U-S, means strong, steadfast, enduring. So these pillars and these arches that were supposedly holding up the heavens had to be strong and had to be enduring, okay? And that's why it's called the firmament, okay? And of course, the word firm means steadfast, strong, enduring. I made a firm decision. I'm not changing my mind. Boom, it's a strong decision. You know, the story is over. We're done. So that word firm and firmament come from the same root. But one means the heavens, the other one means to be strong and steadfast. Okay? So that is our etymology for the day. And you should go look up the painting on the internet, The Feast of Esther. Because actually, let me see if I can find it. Do we have time? We have 1 minute. Let me see if I can find it. And if I can, I'll share it with you. And we can look at it together. Let's see here. It's a beautiful painting. And you'll see Esther, you'll see her husband, and you'll also see Haman, the evil vizier who wanted to kill all the Jews. I can't seem to pull it up. Okay, well, look it up yourself, guys. It's called The Feast of Esther by the artist Jan Levens, right? And you'll be able to see what the painting looks like. You'll see the king's shirt. You'll see the turban on his head, the white turban. You'll see the bad guy and his shadow against the sheet, and you'll see Esther herself, kind of bathed in light. Okay? All right, guys, have a great week, and we'll see you next Tuesday or next Sunday, depending on